This is a sermon for November 12th, 2023, and I'm doing something a little bit different because I've had a lot of pain from dry socket after having a tooth removed. And people have been very good to me, but I haven't been able to concentrate. So, what I've done is I've edited some stories from this book called Stories for Telling, and I've chosen which ones I wanted to do. And the first one is called The Happy Prince. High above the city, on a tall column, stood the statue of the Happy Prince. He was gilded all over with thin leaves of fine gold. For eyes he had two bright sapphires, and a large red ruby glowed in his sword hilt. He was very much admired. The town councilors thought the Happy Prince brought honor to their city, and small children said that he looked just like an angel, though none of them had ever seen an angel. Parents pointed to the Happy Prince with pride and urged their children to be content and peaceful, like the beautiful statue. One night there flew over the city a little swallow. His friends had gone to Egypt 6 weeks before, but he had been delayed. When he arrived in the city, he immediately began to search for a proper place to stay. When he spotted the statue on the tall column, he decided to sleep between the feet of the Happy Prince. Just as he prepared to go to sleep by putting his head under his wing, a large drop of water fell on him. "What a curious thing," he cried. "There's not a single cloud in the sky. The stars are quite clear and bright, and yet it is raining. The climate in the north of Europe is really dreadful." Then another drop fell, and a third. Just as the swallow decided to move to a drier location, he looked up to see tears running down the golden cheeks of the Happy Prince. His face was so beautiful in the moonlight that the little swallow was filled with pity. "Who are you?" he said. "I'm the Happy Prince." "Why are you weeping then?" said the swallow. "When I was alive and had a human heart, I did not know what tears were for I lived in the palace where sorrows were not allowed to enter. In the daytime I played with my companions in the garden, and in the evening I led the dance in the great hall. Round the garden ran a very lofty wall, but I never cared to ask what lay beyond it. Everything about me was so beautiful. My courtiers called me the Happy Prince, and happy indeed I was, if pleasure be happiness. So I lived, and so I died. And now that I am dead, they have set me up here so high that I can see all the ugliness and the misery of my city. And though my heart is made of lead, yet I cannot choose but weep." "What? Is he not solid gold?" the swallow thought, but he was too polite to say it out loud. "Far away," continued the statue in a low musical voice, "far away in a little street there is a poor house. One of the windows is open, and through it I can see a woman seated at a table. Her face is thin and worn, and she has coarse red hands all pricked by the needle, for she is a seamstress. In a bed in the corner of the room her little boy is lying ill. He has a fever and is asking for oranges. His mother has nothing to give him but river water, so he is crying. Little swallow, will you not bring her the ruby out of my sword hilt? My feet are fastened to this pedestal, and I cannot move." "My friends are waiting for me in Egypt," said the swallow. "At present they're flying up and down the Nile, but soon they'll go to sleep in the tomb of the great king." "Swallow, little swallow," said the prince, "will you not stay with me for one night and be my messenger? The boy is so thirsty, and the mother is so sad." The Happy Prince looked so sad that the little swallow was sorry. "I will stay with you for one night and be your messenger." "Thank you, little swallow," the prince said. So the swallow picked out the great ruby from the prince's sword and flew away with it in his beak over the roofs of the town. At last he came to a poor house and looked in. The boy was tossing feverishly on his bed, and the mother had fallen asleep. In he hopped, and he laid the great ruby on the table beside the woman's thimble. Then he flew gently around the bed, fanning the boy's forehead with his wings. "How cool I feel," murmured the boy. "I must be getting better." Then he sank into a delicious slumber. Then the swallow flew back to the happy prince and told him what he had done. "It's curious," he remarked, "but I feel quite warm now, although it is so cold." "That is because you have done a good action," said the prince. And the little swallow began to think, and then he fell asleep. When day broke, the swallow flew down to the river and had a bath. People were surprised to see a swallow in winter. "Swallow, little swallow," said the prince, "will you not stay with me one night longer?" "My friends wait for me in Egypt," protested the swallow. "Far away across the city I see a young man in a tiny attic apartment. He's leaning over a desk covered with papers. He's trying to finish a play for the director of the theater, but he's too cold to write anymore. There is no fire in the grate, and hunger has made him faint." "I will wait with you one night longer," said the swallow, who really had a good heart. "Shall I take another ruby?" "Alas, I have no ruby now," said the prince. "My eyes are all that I have left. They are made of rare sapphires. Pluck out one of them and take it to him. He will sell it to the jeweler and buy firewood and finish his play." So the swallow plucked out the prince's eye and flew away to the student's apartment. It was easy enough to get in, as there was a hole in the roof. Through this he darted and came into the room. The young man had his head buried in his hands, so he did not hear the flutter of the bird's wings. And when he looked up, he found the beautiful sapphire on the desk. "This is a gift from a great admirer," cried the student. "Now I can finish my play." "I have come to bid you goodbye," the swallow said to the prince. "Little swallow," said the prince, "will you not stay with me one night longer?" "It's winter," answered the swallow, "and the snow will soon be here. I must leave you now, but I will never forget you, and next spring I will bring you back 2 beautiful jewels in place of those you have given away." "In the square below," said the happy prince, "there stands a little match girl. She has let her matches fall in the gutter, and they are all spoiled. Her father will beat her if she does not bring home some money, and she is crying. She has not shoes or stockings, and her little head is bare. Pluck out my other eye and give it to her." "I will stay with you one night longer," said the swallow, "but I cannot pluck out your eye. You would be quite blind then." "Swallow, please do as I command you." So he plucked out the prince's other eye and darted down with it. He swooped past the match girl and slipped the jewel into the palm of her hand. "What a lovely bit of glass!" cried the little girl, and she ran home laughing. Then the swallow came back to the prince. "You're blind now," he said, "so I will stay with you." "No, little swallow," said the poor prince, "you must go away to Egypt." "I will stay with you," said the swallow, and he slept at the prince's feet. All the next day he sat on the prince's shoulder and told him stories of what he had seen in strange lands. He told him of the Sphinx, as old as the world itself, and of the merchants who walked slowly side by side of their camels, carrying amber beads in their hands. He told him of green snakes and red ibises and gold fish. "Dear little swallow," said the prince, "you tell me of marvelous things, but more marvelous than anything is the suffering of the people. Fly over my city, little swallow, and tell me what you see there." So the swallow flew over the great city and saw beggars sitting at the gates of palaces and starving children looking listlessly at the black streets. Then he flew back and told the prince what he had seen. "I am covered with fine gold," said the prince. "You must take it off leaf by leaf and give it to my poor. The living always think that gold can make them happy." Leaf after leaf of the fine gold the swallow picked off till the happy prince looked quite dull and gray. Leaf after leaf of the fine gold he brought to the poor, and the children's faces were rosier, and they laughed and played games. "We have bread now," they cried. Then the snow came, and after the snow came the frost. The streets were so bright and glistening that they looked as if they were made of silver. The poor little swallow grew colder and colder, but he would not leave the prince he loved so well. At last he knew that he was going to die. He had just enough strength to fly up to the prince's shoulder once more. "Goodbye, dear prince," he murmured. "Will you let me kiss your hand?" "I'm glad that you're going to Egypt at last, little swallow," said the prince. "You've stayed too long here, but you must kiss me on the lips, for I love you." "It is not to Egypt I am going," said the swallow. "I am going to the house of death." And he kissed the happy prince on the lips and fell down dead at his feet. At that moment, a curious crack sounded inside the statue, as if something had broken. The fact is that the leaden heart had snapped right in two. Early the next morning, the mayor and the town councilors were walking in the town square. As they passed the column, they looked up at the statue. "Dear me, how shabby the happy prince looks," said the mayor. "The ruby has fallen out of the sword, his eyes are gone, and he's no longer golden. He looks little better than a beggar." "Little better than a beggar," the town councilors agreed. "And there's a dead bird at his feet. It's disgusting." The town councilors pulled down the statue of the happy prince and ordered it to be melted down at the foundry. Several days later, the foreman at the foundry reported that though the furnace was very hot, it was not able to melt the broken lead heart. "We must throw it away," he said. So they threw it on a dust heap where the dead swallow was also lying. "Bring me the two most precious things in the city," God said to one of the angels. The angel brought him the leaden heart and the dead bird. "You've chosen well," said God, "for in my garden of paradise this little bird shall sing forevermore in the friendship of the happy prince." And then I have, one more short one, which is just kind of fun. It's called The Wasp's Revenge. There was once a bee who thought it was a great shame that wasps did not make honey. He finally decided it was his lot to teach wasps the skill that had been greatly beneficial to all bees. A much older and wiser bee heard about his plan and advised, "Wasps are suspicious of bees and will not listen even if you approach in good faith. Wasps believe that bees are their greatest enemies." Just because wasps and bees were once enemies, it need not always be so, thought the bee. He then covered himself with yellow pollen until he looked exactly like a wasp. Presenting himself as a wasp who had just made a great discovery, the bee soon taught wasps the art of making honey. They were delighted and worked hard under his direction. As the days passed, the wasps were able to produce as much honey as most bees. Then one day, under the harsh rays of the sun, the pollen that had covered the bee melted, and the wasps realized they had been fooled. Quickly they fell upon the bee and stung him to death. Then, knowing that all bees were enemies, they quickly destroyed all of the honey they had made. Well, those were the two stories that I chose. I think the other ones are too long to read, but I might at some other time record the favorite stories I have. Let me check and see if one more would fit. Let's see. No, it's too long to fit. But I will make another tape of the other stories that I loved. I love the one with the happy prince because it shows how friendship, community, love, caring for the needs of others can change us. And we become most precious in God's sight. It's a beautiful story. And then the wasp's revenge is just very real. I think when people have it in their mind that an enemy is an enemy is an enemy, that so much destruction happens. And I think, unfortunately, we see that in the world today. And so I wanted to share those stories with you. So God bless you, and bye-bye.